This is Your Anxiety Toolkit, episode number 107. Welcome to Your Anxiety Toolkit. I'm your host, Kimberly Quinlan. This podcast is fueled by three main goals. The first goal is to provide you with some extra tools to help you manage your anxiety. Second goal, to inspire you. Anxiety doesn't get to decide how you live your life. And number three, and I leave the best for last, is to provide you with one big, fat virtual hug. Because experiencing anxiety ain't easy. If that sounds good to you, let's go. Well, welcome back. It's so wonderful to have you with me here. Oh my goodness, you guys. I just love you. I feel like I say the same thing, but I mean it each and every time. How are you all? What's going on? How is everybody? I'm doing well, and it is Sunday here in Los Angeles, and it is starting to get hot, and the air around me is pretty warm. So, I think that when we touch base with what nature is doing, we kind of can touch base with ourselves, and I love seeing the changes in the seasons, and I've been really starting to think about that, how as we've done before, and I've had a podcast about how, emotionally we have seasons, and in recovery we have seasons, and, it's just great to go through and notice change around you. And it brought me to this week's episode topic, which is around this area of how we respond to change. And what I wanted to bring to you all is actually a philosophy that I learned many, many years ago that has always really stuck with me. But then I heard it again as I was doing I was listening to an audiobook, and they were talking about it again. And what they were talking about is this Buddhist philosophy. This is not me talking about religion. This is me talking about just a concept that always rang really true for me, which is this concept around the middle path. Now, this idea of the middle path always really, really resonated with me, because I have seen in my life, particularly related to mental health, that the times I get in trouble mentally have been when I refuse to listen and see the middle way. And I'm really thinking in this very dualistic way, that it has to be this way or that way. It can only be this, and if it's not this, it must be entirely that. And we call that in cognitive behavioral therapy black and white thinking, or all or nothing thinking. And so in the Buddhist philosophy, there is this idea around the middle way, which is put in place to help us see beyond the dualistic ways that we think and behave. Right? It actually goes back to the Buddha, who, was very, very rich and was a prince and had everything he wanted. And then he decided to seek enlightenment and starved himself and refused to let himself have anything, any pleasures. And after some time, he realized that wasn't serving anyone either. And so he found what we call the middle way. And I think if we can, and what I really want to do and discuss in this episode is to ask you guys, is there a way you can find the middle way, the middle path, the middle ground, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, the middle way in this philosophy, it describes this middle ground between attachment and aversion, ultimately. So in the Buddhist philosophy, attachment is how much you cling to something, how much you want it. And the more you cling to something, the more suffering you're going to have. And I very much experience that. I'm sure you guys do too. But it shows the middle ground between aversion, which is, and again, a component of the Buddhist philosophy around pushing stuff away. And the more we push things away, whether it be our feelings or our emotions or thoughts, the more suffering they cause. And so this middle ground is trying to balance between those two and swing back and forward and find a place between them where we can exist and we can reduce our own suffering, right? Now, I think it's so true when we're talking about mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't here to make your pain go away. Ultimately, if we were really to break it down, it's really just to set us up to not make our emotions and our suffering worse, right? It's there to help us get through it, kind of like it's like a canoe that gets us across the river. And so for this, the middle way is very much that as well, which is it's there for us to consider when we're finding ourselves being pulled and swayed in this very dualistic black and white way. And for us to find ourselves in a middle where we're not pushing it away, we're also not clinging to it to be a certain way, right? Now, this can play out with anxiety and depression, eating disorders, OCD, body focus, repetitive behaviors in so many ways, right? Like, let's just look at thoughts in and of themselves. How often do we label things as good and bad? That's a good thought, that's a bad thought. That's a good emotion, that's a bad emotion. Or that's that I'm good for having this thought and I'm bad for having that thought, right? Now, the middle path is stepping away from that black and white view of the world and being not attached to it or averse to either. You're just going to allow the good, what is considered quote unquote good, and you're going to allow what is quote unquote bad, right? It's stepping back and observing that stuff and allowing it to have more flow instead of it being so rigid, black and white. This is right and wrong. It's moral or immoral, right? It's my responsibility entirely. Well, no, it's probably not. Let's actually step away from us taking on such hyper responsibility, which I'm going to take a wild guess that a large majority of you guys are hyper responsible because it somewhat goes with anxiety. It really does. It's a theme of anxiety. It's a theme of depression, right? So I'm going to go out on a limb there and make that assumption. Maybe I'm wrong, and if I am, that's fine, right? Now, this middle path is actually also moving us into a place where we can also allow change. That's what I was talking about regarding the seasons, right? And we can acknowledge that at exactly the same time, things can be the same, but also changing, and that both can be true. This middle way is really getting down to this wisdom of reality and truth, that two opposing truths can be true at the same time. And this is a really important one for those of you who have anxiety and OCD, because I think when we have OCD, it wants us to find a certain answer, that it must be this way and then I can move on. But the truth is, in nearly every example I've discussed with clients, there's always more than one truth, right? That something can be true and untrue at the same time. And that's the way it is. That's the world we live in. And that's why I really love this philosophy, because ultimately it's bringing us back to the real present moment and accepting what is, right? That right now, as I look out my window, everything looks the same as it did when I first started talking. The trees are sort of swaying, the sun is shining, everything looks the same. But in the grand scheme of things, everything's completely different to how it was 10 minutes ago, right? And that can create a ton of anxiety for all of us, right? I actually did an Instagram post the other day about change, and it was so interesting to hear people's experience of change, right? That, some people really, really struggled with it. Some people were delighted by it. I think that's true. I think we all struggle in certain different ways related to change. Now, the piece that I really love here, and this is particularly related to therapy and recovery, is this middle path between accepting that our recovery is completely our journey, right? My recovery is my journey. Your recovery is your journey. It's a completely independent thing. Only you can do it. Only I can do it. No one can do it for you. But the middle path wouldn't say, fine, I'm never going to ask for help. I'm never going to, I'm going to do it all on my own. The middle path would be also understanding in this very wise way that recovery also requires community, that we can't do it alone, even though it's entirely your responsibility ultimately, but we can't do it alone, right? We want to stay away from this black and white thinking that it's only us, because it's not only us. It's not only us who are going through this. There is a universal suffering happening in every human being in this very moment, right? Maybe yours is a little higher than someone else's right at this moment, but that will change because that's the middle path, right? It's ever changing. And two things can be true at the same time. Through the depth of suffering, we can experience this middle way of feeling moments of joy here and there, just sprinkled through, right? And that's where this is so beautiful yet so frustrating, is because it demands us to be flow. It demands us to stay fluid and flexible. And this is a really important part of our emotional regulation, our mental well-being, our ability to be able to handle things, is to have that flexibility. And this middle way is such a beautiful reminder of that, I think. Again, my hope for today is to introduce you to this idea of flexibility, to introduce you to this idea of the middle way, finding a middle path that works for you, right? Now, the middle way is also about embracing tension, right? Tension that comes up for us. Because often when we are faced with an adversity or something that causes us pain, our instinct is to fight, flight, or freeze, right? Instinctually, right? We're human. We're going to do that. But the middle way keeps us out of that limbic system where we're constantly in reaction to fear, and has us embrace the tension. We're not clinging to it. We're not having aversion to it, but we're just sort of bowing to it, right? Just with respect, we're bowing and going, yeah, I'm noticing fear. I'm noticing anger. I'm noticing tension. I'm noticing irritability. I'm noticing thoughts that have terror associated to them. I'm having thoughts that feel disgusting, right? So, you might just label them and embrace that tension that comes up in this very sort of regulated and gentle approach, right? Not with good or bad or right or wrong or, have it be here or make it go away. It's just really staying in that middle lane, right? Not swerving off to the left or swerving off to the right. You're staying in that middle lane, right? And you're adapting to change, right? As it continually changes, right? Now, the middle way also is discovering that in this world that we live, things are workable. And this is where I actually love this part of the middle way, because this is where faith and trust come into play. It doesn't have to be faith or trust in terms of religion. Again, it could be just faith in yourself, trust in yourself, that in the end, if you can choose the middle way, all will be well. All will be well. Even if it's the worst thing, it's grief and loss and pain and suffering, and it's your worst nightmare coming true, that by holding ourselves compassionately in the middle way, we can rely on ourselves to get ourselves through, that we can trust that we'll be there and we'll work it out, that we're workable, right? That this world we live in is workable, right? And this comes from when we stay out of those real black and white thinking, real black and white behaviors, right? That we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. Everything is figure-outable ultimately, right? As long as you're not thinking of it in this black and white way where you have to have certainty in order to move forward. Instead of accepting, oh, I'm going to stay in this middle path where there's no, I'm not going to take the left lane and I'm not going to take the right lane. I'm just going to stay here and just see. And with what I've seen with clients is when we practice this, there's this transformation in the office. I've seen it a million times. It's the absolute joy of the work I do, which is where they stay in the middle lane, this middle path, whatever you want to call it, middle way. Let's call it a middle lane, right? Because it's as if you're on a highway or something. They stay there and they're like, holy crap, I can actually stay here. I had no idea I could stay here. I had no idea I could. I had no idea I was able. Because in the past, they told themselves they could do it or they couldn't do it, right? That they should or they shouldn't do it, right? And often what I will love seeing is that when my clients come to this brave place and they stay in the middle lane, often they're delighted of how well they're handling it, right? And this is where we, again, learn to trust ourselves and honor ourselves and believe in ourselves. We move away from a I can't do that mentality to a let's try and we'll see. I don't know if it'll go well. Maybe it won't because it doesn't matter. We'll just wait and stay in the middle lane and we'll see what happens, right? And then if something doesn't go so well, we'll also still stay in the middle lane and we'll see what happens and we'll hold ourselves, respectfully, right? So this middle path is a practice that we can engage in. It's a concept we can consider and it's a truth that we can conceptualize, right? I love it. I really, really do, right? Now, it's also a huge part, as we were talking about with my clients, is it's a huge part of exposure and response prevention. For those of you who are on a mission to stare their fear in the face, and I know many of you are, the middle way or this middle path can be really, really helpful because instead of seeking resolution, right, waiting for it to be over, I just can't wait to get the results, or I just can't wait for this to be done, right? They actually allow themselves to settle in the middle, right? They're like, all right, I know I'm here. I know it's not over yet. I know I have some more stuff to get through. So instead of tightening up and gripping, right, with that, as we were talking about before, and that attachment aversion, pattern, I'm actually just going to relax, right? I'm going to settle in. Now, I'm not saying you're going to feel great. Of course not. But I'm going to relax and settle into it because the truth is it's not over yet. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm just going to stay in the middle lane, right? I'm going to stop side swiping the right lane, just hoping that sooner or later there'll be an off ramp, right? You're not just going to sit there and, no one gets to enjoy themselves if that's the way that they're thinking and acting, right? And my hope here is the more we delve into this idea, right, the more we can learn to rest between those opposites, those polar opposites that are happening so often in our lives, right? It's such a beautiful practice, right? So my hope from today is to have you look at your day and see where the middle path, the middle way, the middle lane might help you. And how even just this concept might get you to see where you're stuck in the black and the white, right? Where you're stuck in the clinging, where you're stuck in the aversion, where you're grasping, right? And maybe letting go there a little bit, right? Maybe acknowledging that there is so much learning in that middle section, right? And oh my gosh, you guys, I cannot even tell you how much I believe that and have experienced that, right? There are some times when our worst fear comes true, right? Like the thing you've never wanted to happen, a loss of a loved one or loss of a job or whatever it may be. And then you look back and you're like, wow, I've worried about this my whole life, but yet I'm kind of doing it. I'm kind of getting through it. It's not fun. I'm devastated, but I can do this, right? This happens all the time for me with clients is, they might reflect on something and say, wow, I've always really worried about getting sick. And then I got the flu and, when I had to stay in this middle lane and I learned I can. It wasn't ideal, but I learned I can, right? I think there's a lot of learning that comes from that middle lane if we are brave enough to stay in it, right? So that's all I have for you guys today. Something I'm considering, something that I'm reflecting back on after learning that concept many, many, many years ago. I think it's time that we, I would love to hear your thoughts about it, right? All right. For everyone who doesn't know, I will be speaking at the International OCD Foundation Conference. It is in Austin this year in July. You can go to the iocdf.org to hear about it. And if you have obsessive compulsive disorder, I promise you this event is so cool, so good. The best of the best, most amazing researchers, doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, everyone meets and it's fantastic. And I am so excited. I'll be presenting, I think it's like 6 or 7 times. So holy smokes, I better get organized. But the cool thing is 3 of those are actually talking about compassion. It's a morning group. We meet every morning at I think 7 o'clock and we talk about how to be compassionate towards ourselves for the course of the conference. And it's my favorite thing to do. So come on over if you're interested. Okay. All my love to you guys. There is no, I did a hard thing today, mainly because I couldn't get myself together in time to get it done. So I'm going to practice the middle path about that as well and be radically accepting of that. I hope you guys are doing well. I am sending you love and a huge virtual hug. I hope you know that I see you and I hear you, even though I might know you. I'm so grateful for this community. So thank you. Please do leave a review because all the reviews, even if you just leave you click the stars and that's all you do, please leave an honest review because the more reviews we get, the more likely I am to get the big hotshot guests. And that would make me happy and it makes me feel like I can deliver really, really great content to you guys for free. So if you have a moment, go over to wherever you listen and leave a review. That would make my day. Okay? Have a wonderful day and I will talk to you soon. Please note that this podcast or any other resources from cbtschool.com should not replace professional mental health care. If you feel you would benefit, please reach out to a provider in your area. Have a wonderful day and thank you for supporting cbtschool.com.